So anyway, hello everyone. Happy to be here again. Thank you for inviting me once more. And it's always a pleasure to see new faces, old faces, and to have this opportunity to share some Dharma chatting with friends who are interested. So that's always nice. It was suggested that we could read together and share some thoughts about this prayer of the six Bardos, and which is a wonderful idea, and I'm not sure how qualified I am to speak about that, but anyway, I'll try my best. But before we get into that, I would like to tell a few words about this thing that comes up quite often, where probably maybe it doesn't mean anything to you, but it's a question that comes up a bit, where people ask if Buddhists are, if Buddhism is a non-theistic tradition, to whom do Buddhists pray? Or what is a Buddhist prayer, you know? And I have reflected on it a bit recently. There's those things that, you know, you take for granted, and then suddenly one day you say, okay, somebody asks a question, and then you start reflecting. And I think it's interesting. It might be interesting to understand what a prayer is, since we are discussing a prayer. And even though sometimes a prayer actually you're talking to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas or something like this, and it might sound like you're asking to somebody come and protect me, or do this or do that, or make me do this, or give me your blessings, or things like this, then it sounds like we're calling to some external being or force or principle. But I think it is the Buddhist understanding that you actually, all of this, even if we're talking about deities or Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, when we address, we're not really asking anybody to give us something. It's more like we are calling upon our own Buddha nature. And sometimes we use examples of teachers or people or beings or principles that inspire us, but mainly in order for us to bring to the surface of our mind, we could say, the best in us, in a sense. So a prayer is often, maybe a prayer can even be silent, you know, just meditation is a form of prayer. But I find it can be very useful when you're dealing sometimes with a problem, not in necessarily asking for a solution in the way people generally think, like you're in a tight spot and then you do a prayer and then God solves it all. Not necessarily like that, but when we are having a problem or we're confronted with some difficulty, sometimes reciting a prayer allows us to sort of take a distance in relation to that specific situation, see it from a much broader point of view, see the big picture, and understanding, see it from another perspective, and then being able to sort of come back to the situation and have perhaps some more creative solutions or ways of looking at things that are less fearful and come more out of our most profound or our deeper nature. So many times also prayers can be a lot of things actually, but many times when it's more like this prayer, it's a kind of an aspiration. It's also it's what Americans call, it's a bit of a pep talk to ourselves. You can do better. It's like reminding ourselves that we can, or what we should do, or what we know would be better for us, or better for others, better for the world. So it is that sort of moment where we maybe take a step back from all the little problems of our day-to-day life and look at things that really matter. We can get easily sidetracked by things that are not that important, but because they seem to need urgent attention, take away all our energy into solving them, and maybe we sort of forget, or we are sidetracked from the thoughts or the things or the motivations that are really matter in a more long term or even medium term sense. So sometimes for some people it is very natural. I would say now is a minority. 100 years ago or more, people would normally pray. It was part of their day-to-day life. They would start the day with a prayer or end the day with a prayer. That was very normal. Nowadays, it has become much less. So for most of us, and I can totally relate to that, praying is perhaps not the first thing that occurs to us when we are when in our daily lives, unless we have had training in Buddhist ways or something, we have lived in a monastery or something like that. But besides that, it's perhaps not something that we naturally feel inclined to do. But it might be a way to, as I said, to just align ourselves with a deeper understanding or a deeper feeling. So so that's the idea. Now, can also be silent. It can also be something that we say with our own words. The reason why there's written prayers, somebody wrote them, of course, or they can be useful because if they express something that we deep feel, what maybe is not so useful is just repeating them without meaning. So for some, reciting in Tibetan is really awkward. For others, is really fine. But above all, I think what we should think is that a prayer is not just a sentence or a phrase or even a job, something that a duty or something that you have to do. It's more like conditioning ourselves to feel in a certain way. And that's why I was jokingly saying that this is a sort of pep talk, is like putting ourselves into a certain kind of mood or reminding ourselves of a certain number of things. And that's exactly this particular prayer is a bit like that, is reminding ourselves of things that are the most important things, but we perhaps sometimes in life get forgetful about it. So it's so there's an English translation, and it's the root verses on the 6 Bardos, and from the terma of Karma Lingpa. So there's one, I'm sure you're all familiar with the word bardo, and also this teachings in Tibetan Buddhism. It's either Bardo. First of all, Bardo means in between or between two things. And then when you generally hear the word, is often referred to in between two lives, like the state or the experiences consciousness goes through after the death of after one death and the next rebirth. But that's just one of the Bardos. There are 6 different states of consciousness through which we go in the cycle of life and death. And sometimes it is referred as 4 and sometimes as 6. When we're talking about, you'll see by, I mean, again, I know, I think you probably know all of this, but just in case, so I'm repeating it so we remind ourselves. So the first one is what is called the Bardo of life. And the text says, Kema, now when the Bardo of this life is dawning upon me, I will abandon laziness for which life has no time. Enter undistracted the path of study, reflection, and meditation, making perceptions and mind the path and realize the 3 kayas. Now that for once I have attained a human body, this is not the time to remain in the ways of distraction. So it's the pep talk about how to use our human life now that we have it. So the Bardo of life is the Bardo of life. It's this where we are right now. It's just being alive with a consciousness that is connected with the human body in this case, and with all the opportunities that it gives us in terms of everything, but specifically in this case, with all the opportunities that it gives us in terms of practicing the Dharma and training our mind. And I know from my own experience and being a Buddhist for now 50 years, my God, being a Buddhist for 50 years, it is so much part of my life that you tend to sometimes take it for granted, because our whole universe, especially after so long, all my friends, the things I want to do, the places where I go, and most of, I mean, not to say my entire life is basically connected with Dharma activities and the people I know and all of that. So it sort of seems like it's there to stay. You know, it's mine. It's my life. I can't distinguish, but it's not as guaranteed as all of that. You know, so many things can happen. It cannot be removed from your mind unless you just forget who you are and don't have any more sense of anything. Of course, in that case, it might disappear from your conscious mind. But it can be very difficult to connect to other people, for instance. Imagine, I don't know, so many circumstances in life. It depends how deep your connection runs, but sometimes circumstances can be very important, and moving from one city to the other. I've seen that many times. People attend teachings, come to a group, are very, they practice very regularly and things like this. No problem. Are very regular and consistent, and then something happens. They get married, they change, they move somewhere else, and then they get distracted, and other things take over. And in the beginning we say no, but I will still practice, and then days go on, and then you have less and less opportunity, and things like this happen all the time. And so, it's nothing is really guaranteed any time. Again, even if the Dharma is very present in our lives and in our minds, I also have realized perhaps it's just me, but when we are sick, for instance, if we don't have energy, or just a simple flu, for instance, and you can't really sit to meditate or anything, you will just have to deal with whatever difficulties you're facing with the training that you have acquired previously, but you're not really able to, most of the time, unless you're a very experienced practitioner, you will not be able to deal with the difficult, really hard, difficult situations, perhaps in the way you would expect. So, and as we know, life is always going, and every day, every extra day is a minus day. Every day we live, it's just one day less. And this perhaps sounds very gloomy, but it's the sheer truth. And like it says here, I like this expression. They say, I will abandon laziness for which life has no time. Like it is true. We still know, all of us who have been Buddhist even for 5 minutes, we have heard about impermanence, and so it's not that intellectually we're not aware that impermanence exists. But we still, even though we are fully aware that we could all die today, we still do plans for, for tomorrow, not only tomorrow, that's still okay, but relatively okay, because it can all be finished. But we're making plans for in 10 years or in next summer or things like this. And even, I'm not saying we shouldn't make plans. Of course, we need to make plans sometimes, but for certain things. But it's not that. It's not really the making plans. It's the sort of inherent, almost unconscious belief that we will be here tomorrow. None of us, I think, really actually believes that he will not be here tomorrow. That's why, for instance, these teachers, the Kadampa teachers, the old Kadampa teachers, who were living really by the mind training, they had this habit of, in Tibet, when somebody died, you would turn his bowl upside down, where you used to eat soup, you would just put it upside down. So as a sense, like when you have a shrine and then you undo you pour the water away, you then turn all the bowls upside down. So every evening they would, after they finish eating and before going to bed, they would turn their own bowl upside down as a sign to themselves. Like, if I die tonight, it's already done, it's nobody has to worry about it. And or things like they wouldn't put ashes over the fire so that it would be easier to revive the next morning, they would let it down, they would let it go off, because they weren't sure they would be there the next morning, and maybe they wouldn't need it. I know this sounds very extreme. I think it sounds very extreme and maybe not necessary, but I think it was a sort of discipline. It was a way to signal to themselves that they were fully aware, and fully aware that that might be their last action or their last moment. And it is something that I sometimes consider myself as somebody who often thinks about impermanence, but at the same time, I'm still thinking that I will be here in 10 years, I am still convinced. So that's when they talk about laziness in the teachings, it's a subtle form of laziness, not not necessarily what we usually call laziness, like not doing anything and sleeping all day, for instance, or something like that. It's as many forms, but one of them is just not being really fully kind of not having integrated this idea that um, life is passing and we need to do something. And then on the other hand, this shouldn't either be like obsessive, or it shouldn't be done out of fear or something like that. Tibetans had they were a hard, harsh people. Mountain people often are, they're very strong and they were very determined. And so they even had this expression saying like, it's somebody really, their motivation for the Dharma comes from the marrow of their bones, something really deep. And you can still feel it when you go to Nepal and you see all these old Tibetans, especially the old ones, like they were still born in Tibet. It's like Buddhism and this devotion and all of this energy it's like it's coming from the marrow of their bones, really. We don't have that because it's not cultural, maybe for many reasons, I don't know. But it's something that they still have. So what I mean to say is, even though we maybe don't have that same determination that Tibetans used to have, in our own way, in our own modern way, we should try to cultivate a sense of, maybe not a sense of, oh my God, I have to do something, but a sense of not just lay back and just wait for life to just unfold, and because we can see, and then we'll see later on, but when we start growing old, we understand all the challenges of old age, and we might have overlooked, losing status, losing capacities, losing energy, and it's actually like losing pieces of our identity, and it will not get better, it will get worse. Meaning, by that I mean, we sometimes live in this sort of illusion, like we're very busy when we are in our 30s, in our 40s, and even in our 50s, we are very busy. The beginning is because children are growing up, and then we have to go running around to do everything for them and having a good job, and then taking them to school and bringing them back, and all of that keeps us very busy. And then a little later on, they're already much more independent. They go to school and things like this, and we start having more time. But then we say, well, when I retire, I will have all the time to practice the Dharma. Yes, will you do it? Because then when we retire, then we start having pains here and there, and not being able to wake up so early in the morning, and then maybe also our mind isn't as clear as before. And so, don't count too much on when you get retirement, because conditions might not be optimal by then, So it's not that we have to feel bad about not doing things, but keep a good balance. And for that is very important, I think, to really reflect on what is really important in life, and do not get too sidetracked with things that are not that important, and do our best. And of course, we don't all have the same degree of focus, I would say. I often think there's this teacher, he's now passed away, and but this is just an example because there were many like him. He was he was one of those Tibetans, very tough. He never came to the West, and I never met him, but I know the story. He's kind of contemporary. He died in 75. So when he was, supposedly, Mingyur Rinpoche is reincarnation. Okay. He is, I say supposedly, Mingyur Rinpoche is the reincarnation of two different teachers, and he is one of them. Anyway, it was his name, his official name was Longchen Yeshe Dorje. He was actually sort of a disciple of the same teacher of then Dudjom Rinpoche. He was a little older than Dudjom Rinpoche, but it was the same kind of level. But he was better known as Kangyur Rinpoche because he knew the whole Kangyur by heart. And when he was 7 or 8, he really wanted to go and do a retreat. And his parents his father didn't want to let him. So he flew from the house with a bag of tsampa and went to a small island in the middle of a river and stayed there until he completed his Nyondro. He was 8. You see what I mean? I often have felt that any one of us has the exact same potential, but we don't have the same determination. That's the thing. So that's why we can't really hide behind the circumstances. Oh, I can't do this because of that, or I can't do that because we can, if that makes us feel better. But the reality, I think the bottom line is that it's a matter of how focused we are. And as some teachings say, and I really enjoy, I think the image is really clear. They say, if you have a hair, like, one of your hairs fall in your hand, you might not even feel it. But if you have one of your, how you call this? Lash in your eye, you won't stop until you take it out. So what the image, what it means is, for some people, life and the meaning of life and, suffering of people or your own suffering is like a hair on your hand. You almost don't even feel it because you're so obsessed with other things. But for the great beings, what they call the great beings, is like a lash in your eye. You can't stand it. So you have to do something. And that's when they do these things that we hear about them and we think, wow, but it's nothing. It for us, it's like something totally extraordinary, but for them, it's not. It's just normal. It's because they can't stand the lash in the eye. It makes them cry all day and all night. So you have to do something to remove it. So, and that's what I mean. Because if we had that sort of determination, and we might say, oh, yes, and we might say, and it's true, he was in Tibet, he had his own teacher, but he had also his own difficulties. His father didn't want. And to punish him, he didn't let him even sleep inside the house sometimes. So for a little boy, and in those temperatures, it might not be very easy. But, determination. So that's the thing. So in one sense, we might think, okay, I don't have it. I don't have that kind of determination. I don't have that kind of focus. So what shall I do? It is possible to cultivate, not to that extent, perhaps, but it's possible to cultivate a little bit more determination. And that's if you have learned a little bit about the practice of Nyondro and the 4 general preliminaries, like thinking about the precious human life, which is something that he speaks here, considering how fortunate we are, not just because we have a human body, which already in itself is amazing, even though when we look around doesn't seem that way, but among all the possibilities, it's still quite rare. And not only that, but how we don't live, we live in a place of relative peace. We don't have to be running for our lives every 30 seconds. And just as a small bracket, the other day I was watching a movie about Israel and all of that. And I realized that in the cities that are close to the border in Israel, they have shelters and anti-bomb shelters scattered around the city, so that wherever you are in the city, when the siren goes off, you have 35 seconds to get to the first shelter. Can you imagine living like that? With the constant threat that you have to be 35 seconds away from the closest shelter. It's just crazy. Just the idea of having shelters in this way proves how I mean, how they live in constant fear. And that is something. I mean, even though we might have gone through wars and things, I think even Portugal, we have been very fortunate, perhaps more than you guys here, but still, it's not something that is a constant reality in our lives now. So just even living in peace is just something amazing, you know, not being forced to even have a certain ideology or a certain practice of a certain religion, or being forbidden to speak your own language or go to your own, do your own practices or whatever. Those sort of things we often take for granted. So appreciating that once in a while, and especially when we see how other people live, and then just, you know, just not feel bad, not just feel bad for them, but also appreciate and be grateful for what we are and what we can do with what we have. So then, of course, impermanence, as we were saying, sometimes when something changes radically, someone dies or gets sick or goes away or something, just reminding ourselves, using actually all the circumstances of life, even the things that touch us in a very indirect way, but as a reminder of you know, putting into making use of the good circumstances that we have. And so impermanence is another thing. Then the karma, we all know, but I'm just reminding us. Then realizing that karma is more than being focused exclusively on doing good or doing bad or those sort of things, which is very important, but realizing that all the obstacles that we can, that things that we consider as obstacles only come from as results of our habitual tendencies. And as I was listening to a teaching of Khandro Rinpoche some time ago about this, she was saying, yes, karma is powerful, but mind is more powerful. So meaning what the sign of a good practice is not necessarily a successful, might say successful practice is not necessarily that you don't have obstacles, but or you don't have difficult circumstances, but it is how powerful they are, how powerful they let them be. You understand what I mean? Because a difficult circumstance can be such, you can take it in such a way that it is a total obstacle for everything. But you can also take it in a way that it becomes fuel for your determination. So it is not about, it's not all about circumstances. It is also, I mean, stronger than the circumstances is our determination to use them in a certain way. To do not let ourselves be deterred by difficult or unpleasant or contradictory circumstances. So trying to make the best out of it. So when we reflect about karma, we should really reflect about how free we are from the habitual tendencies. By that I mean how we can when we see ourselves repeatedly falling into certain patterns, just look at ourselves and look how capable am I to just not do that without guilt or things like that, but just choose, today I won't do it, or something like that. Even simple things, but it's a way to just start training our freedom, which comes from the practice and especially from meditation. So it gives us sort of a distance, a step back from just being automatically doing things. Well, you know, when it is now, there's so much research about the effects of meditation on the brain and things like this. Well, when we meditate, a person that meditates regularly has much bigger or more developed frontal lobes, which are the centers for, you know, mindful action, or action that is actually meant. You're not the habitual part, which is more in the lower parts of the brain. So it means it is the same. I mean, is in terms of speaking about how the brain evolves, it gives the same idea of, if I have bigger frontal lobes, that means that I can take clearer decisions. I'm less moved by, I'm less manipulated by the habitual tendencies, which are necessary, of course. There's all these things that are automatic, are necessary. We couldn't possibly be deciding everything every minute. But then when it comes to destructive patterns, it is luckily we can, when we develop meditation, we can get to be freer to act upon them or not, to choose if we want to act upon them or not. So when we think about karma, is a bit also in these terms, not necessarily only the idea that yes, we must have done something bad because this is happening to us, but also in terms of understanding that we can become more free of karma, of the influence of karma and habitual tendencies, the more we meditate and the more we live in mindful awareness. So that's another point. And then samsara, yeah, as much as we want, we are in an imperfect state of mind, so there will always be suffering and difficulties. It can be better, of course. Now it's far from even remotely perfect, but it can be better, and we should try and make it better, at least around ourselves and to the beings we know, and even those who we don't know that much but have some sort of connection with us, definitely. But it will never be perfect. And so, for instance, worrying excessively about things that are beyond our control or even influence will not help. It will only put us in a negative state of mind when we see things that happen in the world that are so obviously unnecessary. And seeing that as much as we would like, there's nothing we can really do directly. In a sense, I find that sometimes it's very despairing. We might feel like even totally depressed sometimes. But that, in the other way, I always think in the sense that when you see people doing horrible things, we realize that they're being manipulated by the same emotions that we also have. We're not presently acting upon them, but hatred, jealousy, attachment, aversion, all of this is part of us. I mean, we just have to, we don't even have to look much, it's there. But so it's just a matter of degree. I am not in circumstances, I'm not presently in the circumstances where those emotions might flare up and become totally uncontrollable. But if the circumstances were different, those emotions would be present. They're always latent. They're waiting for something to just flare up. So that gives me sometimes the idea that to change, we want to change the world, but in order to change the world, we have to start by changing ourselves, and everyone has to change himself or herself. So whatever we can do by starting by trying to change ourselves, and perhaps through that we might inspire others to also change. So it also has this, it becomes hopeful, not hopeless. When we look around and see all that and see we can't do anything, sometimes we become hopeless. There's nothing one can do. This is just a terrible world and things like this. But if we see the real culprit of all of that, it's not a person, it's not a country, it's not even an ideology or anything, it's the emotions. Like Shantideva says, I like that, when he says, if somebody hits me with a stick, will I be angry with the stick or with the person? So saying that if people act out of anger, we should actually really be angry with the anger, not the person, because they're being the stick in the hands of the anger. And that's so true. Anger and all these emotions, when they flare up in ourselves, it's like they manipulate us completely, to the point that when we talk about certain states, we saw ourselves do things that we wouldn't even imagine being able to do. I was beyond myself, like sometimes we say, and at least in English, in Portuguese, we also have expressions like that. Didn't recognize me when I was doing these things. So it is that shows that we feel like we are in a state that is not our normal state. We've been controlled by certain emotions. That is what happens with everybody. So realizing that, I think, helps us to turn even this sort of circumstances into something that gives us more motivation to really transform and see that that's the only solution. There's no political system or economical system that can solve the problems, because we have tried now that, humanity has tried everything as far as, all sorts of political systems, and none works because people still have emotions, and their corruption and things happen in all sorts of systems. So that's not the solution. So so here, when they say, I will abandon laziness for which life has no time, that's a way to, it's a reminder that, many things perhaps that are not strictly necessary, because one of the aspects of laziness, according to Buddhist teachings, is being busy, actually, for as strange as it may sound, but being busy with the wrong things, not necessarily wrong, but useless, basically useless. We can spend hours and days and so much money and energy trying to do things that really don't change anything. And so I will abandon laziness for which life has no time, enter undistracted the path of study, reflection, and meditation. And there, here, reference to what we were saying, it has a lot to do with how focused and how determined we are. And if we have that degree of determination, then study, reflection, and meditation are the way to go in relation to the teachings. I found that, for instance, teaching is an excellent way of reflecting on the it's an excellent way to deepen the teachings, and that's because when you teach, you have to reflect upon them, and it proves to be something extraordinary. Everybody that teaches knows that when you teach, you learn so much because you have to reflect upon the topic. So teaching, why not? Yeah, if you have the opportunity, but studying, reflecting, and then meditating as the three classical points of how to learn and practice the Dharma. Making perception and mind the path and realize the three kayas. That's now at another level, but just also, I would say, to make it accessible, it's a bit like we were saying, not being troubled or perturbed by what we see, especially in the world like ours, and as it is right now, and it will probably continue to be or even become worse as things get more complicated, climate problems, natural disasters and things like this. But even just in the day-to-day life, sometimes we come across people being mean or violent or things like this, and try to not get too caught up into these things, taking sides, for instance, or yeah, taking sides is very important because it immediately brings about attachment and aversion, and we already have it, but it brings it even more, intensifies these sort of feelings, or being fearful, or all these things. When we see things happening around, we should try to understand, first of all, it's samsara and it will never be perfect. Second, what can I do? Can I do something? If I can do something, then I should do something. If I can't do anything, then I shouldn't get too caught up and try to use everything that we see as a way to develop wisdom and compassion and motivation to work on ourselves and be of service, or be helpful or useful in whatever way we can. But without, and that's, I think it's a very important nuance between, because all the, even just normal human beings, decent human beings, but even in all religions, compassion is a big thing. But what is perhaps different with Buddhism is that we will talk more about bodhicitta than just compassion. And it has a different twist to it, because in bodhicitta, it's not just about helping or desiring or aspiring or helping or relieving the suffering of beings temporarily. It goes beyond this. It's this fact that what characterizes bodhicitta is this hopeful idea that it is possible to go beyond suffering. That's very different from, for instance, seeing people suffering and then trying to help without this, trying to help alleviate suffering temporarily. Bodhicitta has a different twist. It's much more hopeful, because the idea is that, yes, we are all plunged into suffering, but it is possible to achieve a state where we go beyond, and that's what we want to do. for us and for others. So it's not that desperate, we would say. It's not something you won't cry your eyes off. You think I'm going to need a little my voice. Okay. So Bodhicitta has this more hopeful touch where it's not just sadness, there's something else. There's this hopefulness, that this hope that something is possible, a state without suffering is possible. That makes a big difference. Buddhist compassion is different. It's not so desperate. You were going to say something?
Well, actually, this is a question that I have been asking Rinpoche last time he was here, or I was thinking about this, because there are people who are kind of hopeless and desperate. They can see the suffering of samsara, but they can't see the hope there, because they have not experienced something that would really make a solid hope for them. So there is always the same kind of doubt. Is that kind of, because now you are saying that Bodhicitta has that hope. So is it the breakage of Bodhicitta vows?
Is it what, sorry?
Is it the breakage of Bodhisattva's vows if you feel very desperate?
No, not at all, no. But I think what happens is that's where a teacher or a realized person is really important, because it's when you, like, I was attending a retreat 2 weeks ago, and there was this Christian friar and myself. It's a end of life retreat that we sometimes do with volunteers. It's not a Buddhist thing specifically, but it's for volunteers in palliative care. And he was saying that, and he is somebody really open-minded, and I really enjoy. We have a good time. We have good laughs together. And he was saying this, and it is so true. He was saying, there's nobody, of course he talks in Christian terms, but he says nobody ever converted because he read a treatise about some religion. But when you meet somebody who is realized, you look at that person and you say, oh, I want to be like you, or I want to be like him. And that's why, I mean, sometimes people say, oh, can I be Buddhist and not having a teacher or something? Yeah, sure, you can. But it's when you see somebody who expresses this sort of, exudes this confidence, this hope that there's a possibility of going beyond this condition, and you sense it even without conceptualizing it, but you feel secure, you feel safe, you feel like that person really isn't afraid, or something like that. You can put many words, you can put a long description, but it's a moment where you say, okay, it is definitely possible, because he is the proof that it is possible, you know? But sometimes either you don't never meet somebody like that, or sometimes you're not even open to that, so you don't recognize it.
Yes.
Recently also I came across this quote by a Lama. I can find it for tomorrow, but it was very interesting, because he was talking about devotion. It touches a little bit what we were saying here. And he always says that, for instance, in the Tibetan teachings, they talk a lot about devotion. And they say that you go from the outer Lama to the inner Lama. Yeah. But then he said this, and it is very true. He said, yes, but in order to even recognize the outer Lama, you have to have had some sort of recognition of the inner Lama. Otherwise, he would just be a guy like anybody else, you see? So it goes like there's three steps, we could say. You know, first, there is something inside yourself that awakens. There's a little opening, enough that when you're in the presence of somebody who really exudes this confidence or this fearlessness or whatever, you recognize it. And you say, okay, wow, this is definitely possible. People have done this. There's people who have gone through this transformation. And then you want to become like them, and then eventually you do. But that's the thing. I think it doesn't break your vows or anything. I think what can help is just to be either in the presence of those teachers, or sometimes read their lives, or things like that, and also be in certain places also where this energy is very present, like temples or stupas or places like that, because that talks directly to your Buddha nature, and that's where the confidence can come from.
It's more like a person who is already on the path. But there are people who, because I sometimes struggle with the thing that I have found so much help and good in the Dharma and Buddhist path, and sometimes I tell people about it, but then I feel like I'm a little bit leaving something out if I'm not saying them that actually it's not that easy, but you really have to have some kind of receptivity to blessings or something like that, which is needed, some kind of trusting or something like that. And that's missing from, I think, many people who would like to invest in it. And it's very difficult to explain to somebody that, okay, you need a guru who you can trust or something, as it's very strange.
I know, and they might not be willing to listen. It might not make a sense to them at all. Because if you haven't had that opening that I was talking about, if you haven't had it, then it sounds like a cult thing, or this is ideology or something like that, and they might not like it at all. That's where we understand perhaps the preciousness, the extent of the preciousness of our lives, is that we already had that opening, and then we met the right people, and then the opening became we could then act on that, and that has changed us. But if you don't have the opening in the first place, then it's very difficult, because then you find people who are very angry and very hopeless, and angry with everything that is so unjust and so unfair, and they can go on like this all your life. Unfortunately, the more you tighten up, the more you tighten around something, some cause or something, the worse it becomes, because you get closer and closer. You're closed to any possibility, and then it becomes really extremely difficult. That's where, even though from the Buddhist point of view, suffering is not necessary, like perhaps sometimes in some other, not necessary, maybe even religions, but you hear that a lot in the New Age thing, that suffering makes us this and makes us that, and it's very, we choose to suffer and things like that. It doesn't make sense to me, but anyway, I don't know if anybody would choose to suffer. We all want to be happy, but anyway, I think what happens is, if you really, really get so tense, so angry, so closed, so tight, then suffering acts a bit like an axe that breaks that sort of shell, and until you gets to your core. And it's not that it's necessary, but it happens. And when it happens, sometimes it's what breaks you completely open. Mm-hmm. And sometimes doesn't, because suffering is not like a magic wand, you know. It can make you worse. Yeah. But sometimes, most of the time, yeah. But sometimes it doesn't, you know, and that's how people coming out of concentration camps, sometimes 1 in 100 or comes out of a much better person. So it is possible, but most of them will come out even more close, more angry, traumatized, and all of that. So it all depends on us. But from the Buddhist point of view, compassion, and especially, I mean, not just compassion, but bodhicitta is there's enlightenment. There's the hope of enlightenment behind it. So it is not hopeless. You see, suffering exists because of different conditions and causes, but it is possible to go beyond. There is cessation of suffering. That is the basic, I mean, all the Buddhist teachings come from the Four Noble Truths, and one of those is the possibility of the cessation of suffering. And that's what gives the courage to bodhisattvas, because if it wasn't for that, there wouldn't be a bodhisattva. They couldn't have the fearlessness to carry on their activities, because what for if there's no hope? Yeah. You see? So that's important. I mean, at this rate, I don't know if we will finish the 6. Okay, so making perceptions in mind the path and realize the 3 kayas. Now that for once I have attained a human body. Yeah, again, it seems very obvious, but it might not be all that obvious. This is not the time to remain in the ways of distraction. So that's very difficult to achieve in our world. Can you imagine? They were talking about distraction in Tibet. They didn't even have radio or television or newspapers or even books, unless it was Dharma books. They couldn't sit down and read a good, fiction or novel or anything. So what kinds of distractions would they have, we wonder, compared to all the infinite possibilities that we have now, scrolling Facebook or TikTok or whatever. It's, anyway, that's the idea. Okay. So this connects to the first bardo, the bardo of life. Within the bardo of life, and that's why sometimes they're 4 and sometimes they're 6. Sometimes you just talk about the bardo of life, but within the bardo of life, there is then the bardo of dreams and the bardo of meditation, which can be considered as separate bardos or can be all considered as being part of the bardo of life. So the second one, if we consider the 6 bardos, is the bardo of dreams. And here he says, Kema. Kema is a bit like alas, or alas in English. You don't say, you say, huh? Mm. Alas means like, I don't know how you say in Finnish, of course. It's like, it's a painful expression. Now that when the bardo of dreams is dawning upon me, I will abandon the heedless, corpse-like sleep of ignorance and settle the mind in its natural state without distraction. Recognizing dreams, I will train in transformation and clear light. I must not simply slumber like an animal, but combine sleep with realization. This is crucial. So this is talking about how we can actually practice meditation while sleeping. This is the perfect, I mean, it's the best of the two worlds. Rinpoche would say. This is not my strong point. I can't even remember any dreams or anything. It's not very easy for me. But the idea here is that either there's two things. When you get to these levels of meditation where you just remain in the natural state or remain in the natural awareness of the mind, without in a sort of meditation without focus or without kind of a more formless meditation, we then try to fall asleep, keeping that awareness, just being aware. And it is apparently possible to go into sleep remaining aware. My problem with that is when I try to do that, either I remain aware and I don't sleep, or if I fall asleep, I can't remain aware. So for me, it's just impossible. But it is apparently possible. And then this is one thing, but also there is also the fact that then you train into, if you start dreaming, you train into recognizing the dreams as dreams, which is also, according to the teachings, very important in the sense of when it's a good training for when in the Bardo, between two lives, to be able to recognize all the experiences that come up in the Bardo, because they're apparently very similar to the experiences in the dreams. So if we train in the dreams, then it will be easier in the Bardo between lives, in the Bardo of becoming. It's called the Bardo of becoming. It then becomes easier to recognize every experience as being as fleeting or as illusory, we can say, as the dreamlike experience. So that's why there are teachings and techniques to be able to recognize the dream. It's called the dream yoga. But as I say, this is absolutely not my forte. I can't I either sleep or and it's really not my. I cannot speak from experience, let's say, but it's a way that it's actually a way to remain aware even in our sleep state. And when we go into the sleep state, we are all the more sort of aware part, exactly our frontal lobes sort of hibernate. So when we are sleeping, or when we are dreaming, the things that come up in the dreams all come from the habitual tendencies. That's why sometimes when you practice a certain practice or a certain sadhana, it will sometimes they include generally in the end some of the benefits and also then some of the signs that you have attained some sort of realization in that you have realized the purpose of the sadhana. And then and one of the ways it can manifest in a vision or but it manifests also in the dreams. And that means that you have sort of integrated that deep enough so that it has become a sort of habitual tendency. So it manifests in the dreams. Like if you see a deity in a dream or something like that, means that it has sort of now be part of your unconscious mind, the habitual tendencies. sometimes it doesn't work. It is said that if you practice a lot of Vajrasattva, the purification, you then start dreaming that you're taking a shower or washing dirty clothes and things like that, and then you see all the dirt coming out of the clothes. When I was in retreat, when I was doing the practice of Vajrasattva, actually I dreamt a few times that I was washing clothes, but then also I dreamt that I was taking a shower, but there was no water, so there was something wrong. There must have been something wrong with my practice. It happened during a time when there were sometimes outings of water. Sometimes there wasn't any water. So it came into my dreams that I was trying to take a shower, but there was no water. Okay, so I must combine sleep with realization. This is crucial. So if we have the opportunity or the skill to practice dream yoga, then we should definitely do it. Now, the third bardo is then the bardo of meditation or samadhi. Kema, now when the bardo of samadhi is dawning upon me, I will abandon all forms of distraction and delusion and rest in the infinite state that is free of distraction and grasping, gaining stability in the two stages, generation and perfection. At this time of single-pointed meditation, having given up activity, I must not fall under the sway of afflictions and delusion. Now, here is talking about meditation, and especially the meditation on just resting, what they call resting in the nature of mind, whether we're talking about the Mahamudra tradition or the Dzogchen tradition. I like the expression resting in the nature of mind, because it is restful, or relaxing. Rinpoche has a book called Relaxing Natural Awareness or something like that. Because that's the true rest, or sleeping or watching TV is nothing compared to resting in the nature of mind. Really deep relaxation is just letting go of everything. And one of the things that is most difficult is we can achieve this with a little training. We can achieve moments of this sort of deep relaxation where we just rest in the awareness, just being aware, not aware of this or that, but just being in this sort of open presence. But then when thoughts come up, the problem with that, what makes us go away from this natural awareness, is that they are very, thoughts that come up become very fascinating. Either they're scary or they might be it's just the habit that we have of following things and finding that they're important. We tend to be like that, even kids, when you tell them a story, next day they ask you for the same story. And then 2 days after, the same story again, and they can hear the same story like hundreds of times. And if you skip one thing, they say, no, it's not like that, And we are all like this. The proof of that is that when we even Dharma teachers use this, stories always get our attention. So if you see people start yawning and falling asleep, you say, okay, let me tell you a story. Then everybody wakes up. And even more so if you say, like Rinpoche says, maybe not, then people want even more. we are all fascinated by stories. We can read the same, we can watch the same plot of a romantic comedy over and over again. You know from the beginning who is going to marry whom, but we'll still watch it, you know, and we will watch it again and again and again. There are sometimes different twists to it, but it's the same story. So we are addicted to stories. We are addicted to thoughts. We are addicted to these things. So that's why when we are resting in the nature, resting actually for a second, the nature of mind is not all that difficult. We probably all have done it many times. The problem is remaining there and not getting carried away by these thoughts that appear to be so fascinating. So out of habit, out of fascination, we just follow them, and there we are. And then we have to bring back things and so on and so forth. So meditation is actually achieved also by purifying ourselves from even the interest in following those stories. So it's the more we let go, and by letting go, I mean relaxing really. Just the more we are able to relax, the more it becomes easier to remain more than a second in this nature of mind and relaxing in that natural awareness without fabrication or without too much complications. Of course, there are many different types of meditation, and we have shamatha, vipassana, and all of that, and we have all our own practices and ways of focusing our mind and things. But it still remains true, whichever sort of meditation we practice, either a more simple shamatha practice focused on the breathing or the sounds or whatever it is, or the feelings or the sensations or whatever, it still remains true that the reason why our thoughts take away our attention is just because they are so fascinating. And it's like we never get tired of them, you know. Thought appears and it is the same that has appeared a million times, but we will still be willing to follow it, you know. I sometimes catch myself with the most absurd thoughts while in meditation, you know, like how much did this cost? And then I go on and say, oh yeah, or how can I do to get to this place? And then I start thinking, oh yeah, I turn right and then turn left. Things like that, that absurd. They can, I mean, there's no point, I'm not going anywhere. So it just comes up. And because of the habit, you elaborate on it and then it takes you away from that. And the more, when you catch yourself doing that, you then realize that you are somehow, there's even a little tension. Even if of course, if the thought is controversial, then it's even worse if it makes you fearful or whatever. But even if not, even if it's just a very sort of neutral thing, it still brings with it some sort of tension compared to the relaxation that is just to remain in that natural awareness. So when we think about that, and if actually lately I've been trying sometimes when, for instance, when I travel, I am very I can get a little worked up with not missing the plane, for instance, or something like this. And then now this time around, I cut up myself with oh my God, and then okay, relax. And then I realized that that's the only reason why, probably I'm just imagining, but that's why Ringo Tuku can travel so much, because he doesn't get stressed up, you know. Because what tires us is the stress, not necessarily the things, you know. Even giving a talk, I have noticed that. If I'm worried that I might not have enough time, or I might have too much time for the topic or something, then I start talking, and it comes out of, somehow comes out of fear. But Rinpoche, when he talks, I find that he doesn't really mind. If the time is too short or too long or whatever, he will just stop and that's it. He's not worried about anything. He's able to remain relaxed in all situations. And I think this is the trick. What tires us is all these things that we get tense about. And if you are sort of, some people are more relaxed and some people are more tight, but if you are a very organized, or what they now call a control freak, your life is much more tiring, because you're trying to control everything and everything has to fit into this. Yeah. But if we manage to just relax, then things flow much more easily, and you get much less tired. Yes.
Jos tuossa pystyy olemaan siis lepäämään tai rentoutumaan mielen luonnossa, jos se onnistuu, niin onko silloin harjoittena myöskin ei-dualistiset tilat? If you are able to rest or relax in natural awareness, are you then in non-dualistic state?
Yeah. Recently, yeah. There are three types of awareness, one might say. There's this normal awareness, which is what we just being alive, awake. Like we know, if I pick up this cup, I know that if I want to drink, I pick up the cup to drink. I'm aware that I pick up the cup to drink. That means everybody is aware all the time, unless we pass out or something like that. That's the ordinary awareness. Then you have the meditative awareness, which means like you watch yourself pick up the cup, or you watch yourself be aware of the cup, or be aware of something. So when we are in meditation, it's sort of like there's more space. It's like when we have a thought in an ordinary awareness, it's like the thought is the whole thing. I mean, our awareness is completely filled by the thought. We are even sort of sucked into the thought. It's like the thought is a vacuum cleaner, and it has sucked us in. So all our awareness is taken by the thought. In meditative awareness, there is space around that. You are aware of the thought is still there, but you're bigger than the thought. But there's still duality. There's still you and the thought, and you aware of the thought. Then there is non-dual awareness. Sorry. And in the non-dual awareness, you become so relaxed that it's like, if you want to express it in a very Zen-like style, you would say, like, for instance, if you're listening or hearing something, you become so relaxed that it's like almost the watcher or the observer disappears, and it's almost like the sound hears itself. It's very Zen-like, but sort of describes this sense of there's only perception, there's no one perceiving it. It's just one thing. It's a perception that is perceived, but there's nobody separate perceiving it. And that's when you rest in natural awareness, you rest in a state that might be fleeting. We're talking about us. We're not talking about you. I mean, if we're talking about Buddhas, they remain in that state all the time. But for us, it's totally achievable. But as I was saying, maybe just for an instant. And then, you hardly have time to really appreciate the fact that you're not in a dual awareness, that you are in a non-dual awareness. But it's so brief that you might not even recognize it, but it's there. It's achievable. The problem is the moment a thought arises, then we follow it because it's so fascinating, and then we are out of it. But yes, when we rest in this natural awareness, not automatically, but when we rest in this nature of mind, if we manage to remain in that for long enough and in a very relaxed way, then yes, we get to this place where it's non-dual. Yes.
Tarkoittaa se samalla sitä, että subjekti ja objekti tavallaan katoavat ja on vain tietoisuus. So does it mean that the subject and the object kind of disappear and there is only awareness?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it because object and object only exists because there's subject, and subject only exists because there's object. So the moment they sort of collapse into each other, and there's only one thing, they both disappear at the same time. Yeah. I like your questions very much, not only for the questions themselves, but when you speak, it sounds like poetry. It's true. I find that Finnish is such a soft language, and the way you speak is it's very slow and very articulate. So it seems to me like you're reading a poem or something like that. Yeah. Okay. So what else does he say? Lots of things, and of course, it in itself would be a whole. If we were to elaborate a lot, but we say, I will abandon all forms of distraction and delusion and rest in the infinite state that it's free of distraction and grasping. Grasping is a distraction we understand easily, of course, because that's our main difficulty, or the one that we recognize. But grasping is subtler, but it's also important. Grasping is like, it's not that when we rest in this natural awareness, we don't hear or see, or we hear and we see, and there's all the perceptions, but we don't grasp. What does that mean? Grasping is like, you can hear a sound and you just hear it. But the moment you say, oh, a car, you see, that's grasping. Because from there then comes the whole thing, a car at this time. How is this possible? Who the car is it? What car is it? Why is it coming in at this time, or whatever, So you can hear a sound. It's a car, of course. I mean, it's not like we're deaf or something like that, or we go to a place where we don't know who we are or what's our name or what the car is. But we don't grasp it. You see, you hear the sound, you know it's a car, but we don't stop to say, oh, it's a car. You know, it's lighter than that. It's just a sound. Sometimes I say when I'm doing a guided meditation is we try to remain like imagining that we are a newborn. He hears the sound of a car, and for him it's not yet a big thing, it's just a sound. Of course, we can't really go back there because we hear a car and we know it's a car, but it's not a problem knowing it is a car until we really grasp it, make it, make it into a thing. Ah, it's a car, or it's a bird, or whatever. So that's what when here he says, without the distraction and grasping, that's what it means, grasping. Grasping is this moment where we identify something and make it into a thing. And then gaining stability, of course, because as I said, all these things, because the nature of mind is the nature of mind, so it will never be very far away. Nothing could happen. We couldn't think or even be aware of anything if there wasn't for the nature of mind. So it's not like we have to dig deep or go far to find it. It's always within us. We just have to relax. But it is so difficult to be able to fully relax. So as I was saying, getting there or having a moment where we really can experience the natural awareness, even the non-dual natural awareness, is not that difficult. Problem is remaining there. So that's why he's saying here, gaining stability, that's the thing. So that's why we have to, but training in it and gaining stability actually comes by recognizing when we, so the practice of meditation is actually basically recognizing that we are distracted and bringing our mind back. But when we do that, so we are actually gaining stability. So because when we recognize that we are distracted, that's because we are aware, right? So we shouldn't really be desperate or discouraged. Yes, exactly, that's the word. Discouraged when we realize that we've been bringing our mind back, countless times. Because by doing that means we were aware. If we didn't bring our mind back, it would be much worse. It means that we were totally distracted and we didn't even notice it. So it's a good thing that we realized that we were, we were following our thoughts and then we brought our mind back. So that's it. Of course, we might think all this advice here is perhaps for more experienced practitioners than us, but it is applicable to everybody, because whatever type of meditation we are doing, there's basically the same thing. Is we can use different objects as the focus or the reference point of our meditation, but whether it's an object, whether it's an idea or a feeling or something, or a sensation, or something like compassion, or a deity, or whatever, it's always the same principle. It's still shamatha, and it's just the object that might change, but it's the exact same thing. And then always in whatever type of meditation we're doing, even if we're talking about a deity or something, as you might have realized by practicing practices of the Vajrayana, after visualizing sometimes even very complex visualizations and reciting the mantra and being very busy with all of that, there is always a point where everything sort of dissolves. And as a result of doing everything that you have been doing, all the visualization, the rays of light, the mantras, and all of that, then when you dissolve everything, the mind can sometimes get quite quiet for a few seconds, perhaps even. But that's the whole purpose, we might say, the whole purpose of the whole thing is to get to that point, you know, and to experience that relaxation. So that is more like the, as it says here, the creation, the generation and perfection stages. The generation stage in the Vajrayana will be the visualization, the recitation of the mantras, the visualization of the deity, and the visualization of the recitation when rays of light go back and forth and all of that. That's the creation stage. And then when everything dissolves, and thanks to the energy, the intensifying of the awareness that has been generated by this whole process of visualization and so on, then when everything dissolves, because we are in a state of in a heightened awareness, then we can relax in that natural awareness for a while and remain in it as long as we can. It's always advised in the sadhanas, where even in the nyondro or whatever practice it is supposed to get, we should supposedly get to a point where we can just relax and remain in an openness as much as we can. And then it is said, if the thoughts come up, then finish your practice and do the dedication and so on and so forth. So whatever practice we're doing is always the same. It's just that the framework or the object of the focus of our meditation might change, but the mechanics of it is always the same. And the purpose in the end is also the same, to get to that point where we are sufficiently relaxed to be able to remain in this fresh, open awareness in the simplest way possible.
Voisiko tuon saman toteuttaa sillä tavalla, siis kuulon kautta, että panee radion päälle oikein mökällä ja sitten antaa sen olla hetken aikaa ja sammuttaa, jolloin tulee sellainen mahtava.
Could you get to the same point by using loud sound, like playing the radio very loud for some time, and then suddenly you switch it off?
Never tried, but maybe. Maybe, actually. I think I have experienced it sometimes. Like I might be listening for a video or something like that, but even a talk or somebody talking. And then sometimes when you turn it off, it's like, oof, you know, silence. So, yeah, I mean, you don't necessarily meditation, all these techniques, they have been proven. I mean, thousands of people have used them, and they have this general effect that we can, what can I say, we can trust that they might function for most people. Sorry, but because we're talking about the nature of our mind, and as I said, it's not something foreign, it's the nature of our mind. So it is possible that there are other techniques or other things that might work, and especially different people might be we are all different, so what may work for me might not work for you, and vice versa. So if it works for you, go for it. It works for you? Okay. I hope your neighbors don't. I hope your neighbors are okay with that.
It's just Lena meditating.
And you're talking about Metallica or classical music?
Siis klassinen on kamalaa.
Classical music is for.
Depends, yeah.
But there are practices where you shout very loud.
Yeah.
That's a little bit like that.
And it does have an effect when you shout that sort of syllable with the right thing. It gives a moment of brightness. Yeah. Yeah, all these things might work. It's just that the more I study, understand, and experience all these techniques that Buddhism has to offer, the more I realize how clever and perfect, in a sense, they are, because they are able to join together, especially the techniques of the Vajrayana. They bring together the conscious and the unconscious part of our mind to work together. And that's very important. All the visualizations, we might think, oh, okay, why should I visualize a green woman dressed in a very strange way? And what does that has to do anything with me or something like that? But every detail of those visualizations addresses a certain number of habitual tendencies and patterns that we all have, and purifies them in a sense, not that we need a shower. I mean, you might, but it's not in that sense, but it sort of deactivates the pattern or substitutes the pattern for something else. So they really go beyond what we can understand with our conscious mind right now. And I have, I've been Buddhist for 50 years, so I went through different stages. First of all, as a beginner, you are like, you're ready to believe anything, and then you grow a little more experience, and then you start to say, oh, okay, well, this must be can I say, symbolic, or it's a way of saying it. And then strangely, as you go even further and you start understanding, no, it's not a way of saying, it's the truth. It might be expressed in a way, because you can't really get to that depth, so it has to be explained like if you're explaining it to a kid. But it's true, and it's much more true than you can think, perhaps. So this is my point of view. I'm not saying this is the absolute truth. I'm just saying this is my experience. And the more I study and experience these practices, the more I realize that they are really, really, really cleverly made. To, when we say skillful means, it sometimes sounds bad, like somebody is trying to trick you into something, but it's skillful in the sense that they really, it's like they're designed with such skill, with such compassion at the same time, but so skillfully that it's really, it's worthwhile trying. It's worthwhile trying. So at this time of single-pointed meditation, having given up activity, activity of the mind, it's not, when we are meditating, it's not like it's not trying to say that we should give up all activity and just go to a cave and meditate, even though that might be useful, but it's not what it's meaning to say. Activity here is the activity of the mind. So when we are meditating, we should try to remain as much as possible in that sort of openness, in relaxation. avoiding or giving up the activity of the mind. I must not fall under the sway of afflictions and delusion. So try to avoid also at those times and at all times the clashes, the negative emotions, and the delusion in the sense of delusion. You all know, mistakenly taking things to be very real, for instance, where not seeing the interdependence, the impermanence, and even the emptiness aspect. So the more we actually practice meditation, the more we can. The main point of practicing meditation is gaining experience. We can hear a lot about Buddha nature and be very inspired by it, especially when it's like talking about the lives or the realization of different teachers or so and so, realizing how free they were from most emotions that bind us, fear or anger, things like this. So there's this, we are in awe, to say, relating to these beings. But the main point of meditation is giving us the experience of the things that we hear about. And that's very important, because intellectual understanding is one thing, but intellectual understanding doesn't really change us. It's the experience that changes us. And so that's the aspect of Buddhism that is almost scientific, because everything that we are told by the Buddha and by the teachings, we can experience it. So perhaps not directly, perhaps not right now, but we have everything. If we train ourselves, with a little training and determination and things, it is experienceable. It's not something that is just merely an intellectual theory or something. It's something that all of us can experience. And the importance of meditation is to put it into experience. That's why when we talk about the three trainings, view, meditation, and action, view always comes first, because that's when we get the teachings about how things are. But then view by itself will not change us. It's the meditation that will. It's when we put that view into analysis, one might say, but analysis through experience. When we sit to meditate and we can experience all the different aspects of the mind and all this reflection on impermanence, karma, or whatever it is, then it becomes an experience and not just an intellectual understanding. And that's why, it's like you have a view and you have the action, but the view will never translate into action if there isn't a meditation to bridge the two. In other traditions, for instance, without wanting to throw a stone to anybody, but in the Christian tradition, the problem often, and I've heard people saying this, is that, yeah, you know what you should do, but how should you train to be able to do that? Love each other, like things like that. Everybody feels like that. That's the right thing to do, but how can I make it real for me? How can I train? So that's the training, is the meditation in Buddhism. You should love your neighbor or love your enemy or whatever, but you can't. And what bridges the bridge between the two, which brings the view into the action, is the experience. And that's why meditation is so crucial. It's not to say that the path of the Buddhist path is meditation. It isn't. There's also view and there's also action. But meditation is crucial to bring view to action, bring the view to our lives, bring the view to our experience in the day-to-day life. And meditation is what bridges the two of them. So that's why it is so important and so crucial. And that we can't really say there's a Buddhist path without meditation. It's not exclusively meditation, and that's why, for instance, mindfulness and things cannot be the Buddhist path, because they don't integrate neither the view nor the, in a very concrete way or very elaborate way, nor the view nor the action or the ethics. But we can't say so it's just meditation, but there's no Buddhist path without meditation, because that's where we can really make it ours. That's when we walk. Otherwise, you have the plan, you know where you want to go, but having the plan and knowing where you want to go doesn't get you there. You really have to walk. Yeah. Okay, any questions? I'm not going to start the next verse because we only have 5 minutes. So if anybody has a poem to recite in form of a question, please go on. If not,
well, I think I have. I'm in a situation where I might have like a day or a week, and sometimes to do a sort of a retreat. That's a very nice situation to have some time for yourself. But what to do? How to organize the day?
Yeah.
Because otherwise it goes, oh well, I'll look at the Instagram or something like that. And clean a little bit.
Yeah, I understand your point, and I of course it might be easier for some people and more difficult for others. I would find it very difficult if I was in that situation. What can I say? If you are in that situation, I would say there are a few things that might help. One thing might help and might not be possible is just to go somewhere else. If you stay in your home, especially if you're not living by yourself. If you live by yourself, it doesn't matter. You're always in retreat in a sense. But if you are living with other people, and if you stay in the same house, you'll be pulled into the habitual things. And so you might be able to sit for a couple of hours, but then you'll say, okay, now I'm going to have a break. And then when you realize you're just going around and doing other things, which is nice too, but I mean, that's not the point. So going away might help, especially if you can find a place where you're a little bit in nature, not in the nature. I mean, if you can be in the nature of your mind, better, but I'm not thinking about in nature, or going for a walk, or of course in a country where it's below zero many months in the year, it might not be very easy to sit outside or something. But anyway, you have to find your own conditions. But definitely, I think going away into a place where there's no Wi-Fi. No, I'm joking, but where there's less distractions, because of the habit, we will catch up on anything, So removing the causes of distraction is one thing. Then maybe make a program for yourself that you don't have to religiously follow, but at least gives you a little structure. And it's better to have it, to make it in advance, so that you know what you prepare yourself for that. It's a bit like I've realized that if you want to fast for a whole day, one of the things that you have to find beforehand is what you're going to do during lunchtime. To find a replacement, otherwise when you get to that time, you're so used to eat that it's going to be horrible not eating. But if you find something to replace, something that you decided, now during lunchtime I will do this, then it makes it easier for me. I'm not, maybe you are totally different, I don't know. For me it works like this. So make a little plan, and sometimes within that, for instance, if you're doing some Vajrayana practice, have a purpose, like, for instance, I will recite these many mantras. That again gives you a framework. You might, before deciding to, no, I'm fed up, I'm going to have a coffee break or something, then you'll say, no, but I will just continue until I finish this much that I have planned, or something like that. Not that it should become the main focus of your practice. That's not what I'm saying. But the fact of accumulating numbers does still have a little effect on keeping us into that, instead of just letting ourselves, follow the distractions. And another thing is, you can also then not make too long sessions. Keep it like an hour and a half, or even less if you can't do that much. And take a break, get a cup of tea, stretch a little bit, do some exercise, and then go back, or read a little bit of a Dharma teaching, or hear some teaching and then go back, things like this. But don't be too hard on yourself. Start perhaps by half a day, a whole morning, and then increase progressively. But yes, definitely, when you have such an opportunity, it's good to use it. But I don't know, things like this, I don't know if it helps.
Yes.
Okay, I think we should all go have lunch, dinner. Thank you so much for coming, and we will continue tomorrow. We still have 3 Bardos to go. Thank you, and I don't know if anybody is there, but
thank you.